All right. Let me just double check if everything is working. Oh, whoops. I might have accidentally started off something. Okay. Cool. I think that's all good. Hello, everyone. Hi, Alan, Yan, Rodzilla. How you guys going? We had a bit of a spam in our chat hours before our stream started, so let's hope that was all the fun in that level that we were getting. I'll wait a few more minutes, see who else drops in. Where is that coming up like that? Hey, Kayla. How are you tonight? Hi, Joseph. Alrighty. We'll see who else all got in. I'll show you a few little things that we've changed since the last stream. I did do a video update posting on Saturday or Sunday. I'm not 100% sure when it was. As I did make a few changes already. The most important one being this little guy here, which is our new hero ship that we're using. So that's the craft that we'll be flying around with. I'll just add it to outside of the ship here just as placeholders. We might eventually make them fly around, but that's not something that I wanted to work on today. I just wanted to have those out there. The other thing that I added is these guys. So they don't do anything yet either, but we'll start having some fun with those pretty soon. So these are a couple of ships that we'll be using as enemies. Both these models were bought from a person called CG Pitbull, who is a modeler that sells his assets on CG Trader, which is where I got them from. I think he's also on Sketchfab, and he makes some really cool stuff. So as just little stand-in models for us to use for now, this is a good thing to begin with. So that's why I added those. The other thing that we changed since last week is that for now, all the asteroids in the asteroid belt are using the same mesh. This little guy over here, which is one of the lower LOD versions of the asteroids that Union Byte supplied us last week. And I've done that purely because some of the higher poly count asteroids were really taking their toll on our frame rate. And with this lower poly model, which still looks really, really good, all our frame rate problems pretty much were solved. Now, as I said last week, I do want to do a lot more with the asteroid belts. I eventually want to put an LOD system in. I want to break up the mesh instances much more so that we don't have these large spaces handled by one mesh instance, but we break it into smaller bits, and that allows us to much more closely target which mesh instances we actually render and which ones will actually have collision shapes. And we'll probably start doing things that we don't just detect when our player ship enters one of the mesh instance boxes, but we also monitor the enemy ship. So we might actually end up with maybe 3 or 4 mesh multi-meshes having active collision shapes, so that we can also have our enemy AI react on evading the asteroids, or if they do run into it, react to running into the asteroids. Other than that, I've just been cleaning up a few things. So our carrier right now is still the carrier model that we used before. Now, one of the things that I've noticed, which I also mentioned in my update video, is that while we're inside of our carrier, our frame rate really suffers, and that has a lot to do with the fact that the carrier is rendered as a single mesh. It does have a number of materials, so there are probably 4 or 5 draw calls, because we do a draw call per material, but we're rendering the whole thing even if most of it is off screen. And I think that is really taking its toll on our performance. In that respect, there is just too much detail in this object that is rendered unnecessarily. While if either the model would be broken up into smaller parts, or we do some things where a lot of the outside detail is just not rendered when we're inside of the model, we would probably solve that that issue as well. But I'm not going to bother with that right now, because as I said before, I do plan to replace this model with something more suitable to what we're doing. But that is for much later in our progress. That also reminds me, I have to have a look at where I put that. That wouldn't be in here. Hi, Master Rocks. How are you? That should be in here. Let's go to our player. The other thing that I did is I added this little FPS counter in here. I'm going to move that a little bit to the side because it was too far to the center of the screen. Interestingly enough, when I run the game, our preview on screen shows it still relatively in the center of the screen, while for me in my vision it really is up in the left corner of my vision. It's only a temporary thing, just a placeholder, so I can keep an eye out on how we're performing and whether we have weird performance drops, because we did it kind of on feeling in the video last time. This gives us some actual measurement, but obviously that's not going to stay there. We're eventually going to make some debug information available in some other way that is not so intrusive to what we're doing. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I changed since my last stream. I don't think so. I think most of it all is still working. I'm actually going to take this one off. I don't need this guy anymore. Hopefully that didn't screw up my sound. Sure, I'll see it in chat if it did. This guy is also a little bit crooked. Sorry about that. It's probably going to screw up for a minute, so let's give the camera time to figure out what it's doing. That's what you get for knocking things over. Okay, let's do a quick little test run and see if everything is still working. All right, so this is the inside of our ship, which is a lot cooler than the ship that we were using before. You can see the FPS counter in the on the screen, probably somewhere on the left top. Well, for me, it's nicely on the left top. For you guys, it might be a little bit more in the middle of the screen. And you can see that indeed it's not performing very well while we're inside. So let's just go outside and see how it changes. So there we go. We're now nicely up onto 90 frames per second, and it's doing fine. Now, the other thing that you probably notice, which is really funky, is that we go from dark to light. And let's see if we can make that happen again. There we go. It happens again. And we go back to light. And that is actually, I turned shadows on. And, oops, I hit that, didn't I? And, where are we? There we go. And obviously, whenever there is an asteroid between us and our sun, even though our sun, when we, let me actually reorientate myself. Where are you, sun? There you are. So that guy's pretty big. But whenever a asteroid goes in front of it, well, in front of the middle, basically, of course, when I try, it's not going to go the way that I planned. Oh, I'm hitting my asteroid over there. Yeah, we can see that we are in shadow for a little while. And that was that big one that just goes over over our sun. Anyway, look at that. We can even see shadows on our other asteroids. Now, when we come closer to our, oops, come on, mouse, turn, we suddenly see the shadows appear on our carrier, and we also see our frame rate drop quite a bit again because I'm too close to my carrier again. It's too much of the carrier being rendered. We really see the cascades on the shadow maps work here, where we're quite far away now. We see that the shadows are pretty pixelated. But as we come closer, we'll see that we go to the higher resolution shadow maps, and it starts getting much clearer. But also when we are too far away from our ship, we oh, there's two little fighters flying around. We see that the shadows are, getting a little bit crappy. That said, when we look at the shadows in our ship, and for that I actually want to go a little higher so that we're away from the asteroids, because we actually get the shadows of our cockpit, which is pretty cool. So as I turn towards the sun, we slowly see the effect of our shadow on our cockpit, which is where's my sun? Oh, there's my sun. It's pretty neat, I think. So that works pretty well. That actually adds a lot to the realism, and surprisingly enough is performing pretty well when you consider what it's doing. Now, for some reason, we are dropping some frames here. Not quite sure why that all of a sudden dropped, because that was doing pretty neat before. Maybe it's because our ship is again in the front. Yeah, so it does suffer whenever our carrier is in view. Not quite sure why. When it's still so far away, usually it behaves pretty well. Yeah, I need a more optimized carriers for this thing. Now I'm trying to find one more. There we are. They're easier to spot now because I got 3 of them. But yeah, there are our enemy fighters that we're going to be playing with. One thing that I can do is I can hit them. Boom. And that guy moved a bit. No, I didn't hit him hard enough. Let's hit him a little bit harder. Slows down a bit too quick, I think. But we can nudge him around. I put some dampers on them so they didn't go too far. But yeah, we can push him. Give him some rotation. Is he still rotating, or did he already? No, he already slowed down. That's a shame. I shouldn't have put so much dampening force on them. But the idea obviously is that once we start embedding some AI in those guys, we can actually have some fun bumping into them. Hi Matthias, how you going? Yes, this is Godot indeed. Oh, that was the other thing that I'm doing. Okay, let's see how... one of the things that is always a problem, I'm actually going to highlight that by running it one more time, but not picking up my headset. And I keep forgetting to do this, and this might explain why I was having more frame issues than before. Is we're still rendering this guy. So our editor is still rendering our full frame, while this guy isn't. So obviously, that's one of the reasons why I very often go back to script. We'll actually have our frame rate behave much better here. So I'm just going to go. It's a little bit small right now because I'm not full screen. Let's go back full screen. Now we can still see that whenever the carrier becomes in view, it does drop the frame rate quite a bit. So that is definitely one of the things that that we're going to have to address. And that's kind of interesting because the only thing that's changed, I really had a hiccup all of a sudden. The only thing that's really changed between the preview that I did, the update video, and this is that we did add the shadows in. So maybe that's just that is enough effect of having to render all the shadow buffers because of our our asteroid's turning, we have to re-render every, or the shadow buffers every frame. While usually you can render them one time and they just stay static. So as long as nothing moves, you know, we can reuse them for quite some time. But in this case, we've got just too much movement going on. But that said, I think once we get a carrier that doesn't have as many as much detail, or not detail in the mesh itself, but is a simpler mesh with, you know, everything baked into textures, I think that'll solve itself. So I'm not too fussed by it, seeing that the carrier is just stand-in model at the moment. All right, so the thing that I wanted to look at today is I want to start looking at a bit of navigation. So right now, like, you know, I know where those 3 little fighter planes were, but they are very hard to spot, especially when you're far away. And once they start becoming real enemies that we actually want to be able to target, we need to be able to find them. So the idea here is that we're going to make a start on our logic where we basically implement a radar for our player. And anything that enters the sphere of that radar, we need to start doing things with. But we also want to make a difference between what our friendly ships are and what our enemy ships are. So I've done a little bit of preparation work for that already. And the 2 things that are important here is when we look at our enemy ships. I don't know if I can go straight. Yeah, I can. So our enemy ships are actually all extended from an enemy object. And if we go and look at one of our friendly ships, same deal. Everything comes from a friendly object. And that allows us to, first of all, set up a few things that every fighter that we add, every enemy fighter that we add, any enemy capital ship that we add, is automatically identified as such. We don't have to keep remembering to set them up. But also the AI for enemy ships is obviously going to be different from the AI of friendly ships. We're going to be able to interact with our friendly ships, especially if we implement a wingman type logic for our script. Yeah, that is something that we'll eventually get to. I just wanted to get the structure there, that we will have the ability to start implementing that. And, you know, that there will eventually be different classes, that the AI for a fighter will be different from the AI of a bomber. That is something that we'll start looking at when we're much further down the line. Where did I get the carrier from? I got that from CG Trader, so I'll quickly look that up. It's really a beautiful model, and it's so much cooler in CG Trader. I haven't properly set it up because I need to do all the. Let's go to my purchases. That's the easiest way to get it. So here we go. That's the one. There we go. So that's the original one. You can see that there's a lot more lighting going on because the all the lights on the runway are emissive lights. Now, I've set them up as such as well, but because we're using the Class 2 driver, we're not using a GEI probe. That's all just way too expensive in VR for what we're doing. We don't get those effects. But yeah, you can really browse it up if you wanted to. But yeah, that's the carrier that I bought. And again, like I said, for me, it's just a stand-in carrier. So yeah, it's a pretty cool model. It's really nice. So that's the one that we're using. So CG Trader is your friend. They have some really cool stuff there. Alrighty. So one thing that I've done, the other thing that I've done is when we look at our start scene, our carrier is also now changed to a rigid body. Made that really heavy. That's the heaviest that we can make an object for some reason, but that's heavy enough because obviously with our plane inside, we don't want to be able to nudge our carrier. We want to make sure that we are far lighter than our carrier. But the only reason I made it a rigid body is because the detection of everything works better as far as what we want to do. And it makes sense because eventually we might make it so that the carriers and the capital ships are able to fly around and interact with us as well. So those all inherit from the friendly script. And when we look at our layers, we have our player in our player layer, and we have all our friendly ships in our friendly layer. And that's going to be very important when we're looking at detecting things, and especially once we start implementing things like missiles and things like that, where we don't want the missiles chasing any friendlies. We want the missiles to only chase enemies. And it would be enough to just use the layers. But I'm going to add one more thing, which I hadn't done before yet. I'm going to add a group, and I'm going to say group friendly. Boom. And when I go to my enemy script, I'm going to do the same thing. So here we can see that we are in the enemies layer, but we're also going to create a group called enemies. I want to double check. Did I call that friendly or friendlies? I want to call that friendlies. There we go. Because it's a group that will contain all the friendlies. Now, adding a group in our inspector in this way means that any ship that we add into, that we spawn into our scene, because obviously eventually we're going to make it possible for new ships to spawn, especially enemies. We want to be able to spawn them in so they're not all there all at the start. We can create enemy waves that will attack us. The moment that they are added to the scene, they are also added to that group, and that allows us to quickly loop through all the enemies that are in our scene, and we can do things with it. So those are the two important things that that we start with setting up. We have our enemies in a separate physics layer, and we have a group that will contain all our enemies, and the same with our friendlies. Okie dokie. I need a bit of water. All right. I'm going to close these guys off just to clear a bit of space. It's not my player scene that I'm after. I want to go and look at our is it that one? Oh, okay. I had forgotten about those two. Let's get rid of them. They are already turned off. Those were just for some screenshots that I made. Oh yeah, that's the other thing that obviously has changed. Because of our shadow map, everything here is in darkness. Again, our emissive lights don't actually create any light sources because we're not using GI probes. So while the lights are lit up, they don't actually affect the area. We could do a blur thing to make them stand out a little bit more, or glow, I mean. But that's not really too important right now. Again, I don't even want to go down this route in the long run. But without any proper lights and being in shadow because there's no light penetrating our hangar, we're in a lot of darkness here, which is interesting. Anyway, I wanted to get to our plane that we're using here. So I still have my interceptor script, which is this guy. So that was the cockpit that we were using before. This is now the cockpit that we, or the whole plane that we're using right now. Very dark. I've got some lighting going on inside. There's actually a few. Can I see that here, or is that inside? I think I put that inside here. No, I did not. I must have put that inside here after all. Yeah, the screen lights. So I just put two spotlights that are just casting some blue light, as if our images here are casting light on the interior. Now this is where I'm really looking forward to using Godot 4, because in Godot 4 we have projectors added, so that you can actually use, like, I could use my my screen image. Now the image that I'm using for these 5 screens, I can use it as a light emitter, and you actually have those screens sort of light out. Probably would be lost in detail here because there isn't really a good surface for that to reflect on. So just having some blue lights illuminate the the cockpit is good enough for what we're doing right now. But eventually that, you know, we could experiment with that at some point in time if we ever go to Godot 4 for this. For now, it just adds a bit of atmosphere in what we're doing. That reminds me as well, when we do look at our fighters outside, that's just the one that's on the podium. We don't have a pilot inside, and we don't have the light set up here. That is something that we also need to rectify at some point in time. It would be nice to actually have a pilot. Alrighty. So this is our plane, and again the same thing here. I have a and this is one of the things that I also did off screen. I have a base, or a base script here as well that we extend to our fighter and we extend to our interceptor. And while I probably will never use the interceptor model again, I do want to eventually introduce other ships that we can fly. They will all be extended from this master script so that we have all the basic control logic implemented here, and we have some specific logic then implemented over here. So so that's one other change that we did. Hi, Lux, how are you? Okay. So obviously our radar system we're going to start implementing here as well. And for that, we are going to go and start adding an area node. And we're just going to call that radar. So the idea here is that we're going to start detecting objects that become within range of our radar. I'm not going to worry about any sort of occlusion yet. So an enemy ship that disappears behind an asteroid will still be picked up by our radar, but we'll be using this for a number of purposes. One is to be able to select the ships that are flying around us, and eventually also to actually have a little radar screen in our cockpit. Not sure if we get to that today, because that's quite a bit of work involved there, but everything is going to be handled by this. So we obviously need a collision shape here, and that one's really simple. We're going to add a sphere, and we're going to make that sphere really, really big. So that is obviously the range of our radar. Now I'm making it really big right now, so we will, well, why is my default far point so ridiculously close? There we go. So there we go. So that's a really big space for our radar to work in. I might make it smaller at some point, but for now I want it to be nice and large. So maybe I should make it a bit smaller. Maybe we'll do it half of that. So let's see how far away our enemy ships are, so that we actually won't see our enemy ships come in right away. So these are. They're about 3 clicks away. I'll say even with 1,000, that would be more than good enough. Let's actually keep that to 1,000. We will see soon enough whether that's bad or good. The other thing is obviously our area does not sit in a collision shape because we're not colliding with that thing, but our mask does need to change. So we're going to pick up the friendlies, enemies. I'm going to leave asteroids alone right now. That would probably go a little crazy if we add that in. And I think that's going to be something that we will track in a different way. Projectiles, I'm not sure about yet, because those are eventually going to be our rockets or missiles that we're going to shoot. But they might even include bullets as well. So we might not want to track those in here. So we're not going to worry about that just yet. Okay. There we go. Cool. Emilio, how are you going? Yes, I am definitely improvising at this point in time. This is probably the 3rd time that I've restarted this project. Hopefully I am going to see it through this time. That is the plan. But yeah, I'm just inventing this stuff as we go, basing it on the knowledge that I've gained so far. and seeing how much of that we can actually implement or apply to create this this game. So there's no written plan. I've started making some bullet points about what things I want to include, and having that guide, you know, the next decisions that I make. But right now, yes, it's all improvising. So we'll see how well we go with there. Working on things much simpler. If I'm not mistaken, from remembering what things you post on Facebook, your stuff isn't that much simpler than mine, I think. Because didn't you make that top-down 3D game where you fly around in a little copter and stuff like that? That looked pretty amazing. Unless I'm mixing people up, I'm terrible with names, I'm afraid. Okay, so we've got our radar set up, we've got our collision shape set up, and what I want to do right now is I do want to hook up our signals. Ah, that's right, here we go. We're going to have our body entered signal, oops, and we're going to just have that as a placeholder for now. We're not going to do anything with that just yet. I just want to have them for when we do things. And I want our body exited there. Now, the cool thing about areas and other physics bodies entering the area and exiting the area already keeps track of all the objects that are already inside of it. So we don't need to do that here. We don't need to go and add all our bodies to an array to track that. The reason why I am reacting on this is because once we do build that little radar thing, we want to react on that. The same thing is if we end up selecting an enemy ship or a friendly ship, obviously once they exit our sphere of our radar, we want to remove that selection. So definitely the body exit is going to be doing more logic than we're doing right now. Then I am mixing people up. Sorry about that. You meet a lot of people when you're working on these things. Just really, really cool. Okie dokie. Right. So I think the first thing that we're going to add in here is just have a var selected target. So once we select the target, we're going to assign that target to our selected target node. The other thing that we need to do is we need to go into project settings, input map. I'm going to remove all the ones that I'm not using here. Oops, cancel. Why can't I remove the UI except itself? Can you not remove the standard ones? You cannot remove the standard ones. Okay. Okay, that does undo, but it doesn't redraw it. That's interesting. That's funny. It says that it's undone the arrays, but it hasn't actually added them back in. I wonder if these ones are used by Godot for any reason. So I really don't want the standard ones. I am going to delete them. I don't care. I might end up regretting this. But I want to make clear which ones we add. Now, we have logic inside of our input script for handling our joystick inputs. We're not using our input map for that. I might switch to that because that allows more granularity of setting things up, especially if you don't use a flight stick like I do, but you have a proper HOTAS or you have even got like the pedals, because you might end up doing things like having throttle and braking as separate actions and things like that. Don't know. We'll get there when we get there. So at some point I might add that logic into the input map here. For now I'm leaving that logic for the joystick axes in my input script. But for all the other things, for button presses, firing, and that sort of stuff, I actually want to create proper actions in our input map. And again, just like the purpose of our input script allowing us to remap those axes in a UI, or that we still have to build, we'll be able to do the same for our input map. So what we configure here is our default input map that we're going to be using, but we'll eventually add a UI to our game that people can alter all the bindings, because for whatever joystick they are using, or whatever setup they are using, they might want to change the buttons that are being used. It also means that I don't have to worry too much whether I make sensible button choices here, because I can easily remap them without having to recode a whole bunch of things. So we're going to add a few in here that I know that we're going to need. So one is fire. And before I do that, that is Godot 4. So let's not start that guy. Where do I have? Here I've got another copy of Godot running, which is really cool. That's just the official build instead of my my own build, because I want to run this little guy. So this is a little project that comes with the Godot demo projects. I don't know if you guys know, there is on the Godot GitHub page, there is a Godot demos repository, has a whole bunch of demos, which is really cool. This is one of them. And when we run this thing, even though it is showing a beautiful little gamepad, it will nicely react on my joystick input. I should have a second camera pointing to the joystick. So we can check all our buttons and what they are. So when we're firing, so this is my trigger, that's button 0. So it's always nice to check that way. Let's go over here. So for our fire, we're going to say joystick button, and that's going to be joystick button 0. There we go. All right, so while we're at it, we're also going to go button 1, that's going to be our missile. So that's going to be our secondary fire. So maybe can I rename that after I make it? I can. So that's going to be our primary fire. This is going to be our secondary fire. There you go. So those are things that we are going to be able to do with. Now I've got 4 buttons on the top of this guy. So let's use those because they're nice and close. Oh, look at that. That's my HUD thingy. We're not going to use that one yet, just yet. Let's use those for selecting targets, because obviously anything that has to do with fighting, you want to have right at your finger button. So actually, going to make that up. Oops. So I am actually using, and I don't know if that is, oh, my, let's see, is my, it's kind of working. So I've got my trigger there. So that was that button. That one on the side, I don't know if you guys can really see that, because XSplit thingy is messing things up a little bit. But then the most important thing is there's these 4 buttons on the top here. So these are all easily reachable, because I've also got a bunch of buttons down here, and one of those I've set up for my reset. Now, those are harder to use in flight, especially because I've got my headset on. I can't see the joystick. I need to do everything by feeling. So having the buttons that are actually at my fingertips, they help a lot for doing sort of the primary things that you want to use for fighting. So we're going to be using this one, number 2. We're going to use to cycle through we're going to use that to select the closest enemy. And the right one, we're going to cycle through all the targets that we currently have within our radar, including friendlies. So we're going to go and set those up, and we might use the other 2 buttons for just cycling through enemies or things like that. But let's call our closest enemy. Boom. And actually I want to call it select closest enemy. Boom. So that was number 2. Let me go move that back to here so I can see you guys. Number 2, and then cycle is number 3. Okay. targets. And then it's going to become button number 3. Boom. Okie dokie. Perfect. So we have a bunch of actions that we can use to do things with. Hello, Nolka Lloyd. How are you tonight? Thank you for joining. Okie doke. So we need to go and react on those. I think we're going to do that just in our process function. I don't think we have that one yet. So. Now, is action. So we're going to use is action just pressed, which will only be true in the frame where I've just pressed the button. So in the next frame, that will be false. So in here, we're going to select our closest enemy. So we'll implement that in a minute. And obviously there'll be lots more actions here that we're going to implement eventually. I'm not going to worry about firing just yet. We might do something with that tonight if we have enough time, which would be really cool. That's okay. All right. So first we need to find what our closest enemy is. So let's go and close a few of these because it's getting a little busy. I'll leave the enemy as friendly there. So that's our input script that I was mentioning about. So there is, I might change that into using the action mapping as well. I'm not sure yet. I'm still debating that one. It has some advantages either way. Clean this stuff up all a bit. We might end up opening a few of these again. We will see. So for now, I want to go to our area node. So those are all our standard settings. Now we don't use any override things here. We don't worry about any of those, but we have a function here called get overlapping bodies. So this one and this one, these are two that are very handy to know about. So this is going to give us an array of all the physics bodies that are currently within our area, and that one is going to allow us to check whether another physics body is inside of our area. For now, we're going to use this one, get overlapping bodies. That's the one that we need to do something with. So later, might actually be handy if we could declare a variable for that. Dots get overlapping bodies. That's the one. I'm going to copy that in there as well because we're going to need that, but I'm going to leave that alone for a minute. I'm doing pretty good, thank you. Having fun building stuff. Okay, so the thing that we want to find right now is the closest enemy to our ship. So we're going to create a distance, which is going to be figuring out what the distance of our closest object is, and we're going to create a variable which says closest, which we're going to set to nil. That allows us to loop through this and see which one is closest. So, all right. So here we can simply say for body, oops, come on, let's learn to type, in overlapping so we're going to loop through all the guys that are in there, and then the first thing that we want to check is if body dot, I think it's called in group. Okay. Let's go and quickly check node. Add to group. Get groups. No. Is in group. That's the one that I'm looking for. And actually, this is going to be. No, we're going to do that. Body is in group enemies. All right, let's just double check. Where's my? Okay, I don't want you open anymore. Here we go. Groups. Doesn't show that here. That's worrisome. Enemies. Capital E, that's the thing that I wanted to check. The other thing, I was actually expecting it to show the groups here as well, so I hope that doesn't mean that it's lost it, but we will soon see. Let's go back to here. So it was enemies with a capital E. I should tell Godot what's the body. You mean the type of body? Doesn't really matter in this case because I'm only checking for rigid bodies anyway. And I'm checking whether it's in the right group. So it should already work. Anyway, if it is inside of the group of enemies, we are going to actually, we call that closest distance, closest body. All right. So we're going to calculate what the distance between this body and us is. So that's going to become global transform dot origin, and let's also store this because I don't want to access our global transform each time. That's just to save a little bit of time. So that's our distance as far as a vector is concerned. So we need to take the length of that. There we go. Yeah, that is true. If I use static typing, well, I guess I could. Does that work in here? Rigid. It does help if I learn to type. There we go. Now, I guess that I need to do that. How do you type an array of a certain object type? I wonder. I don't know actually. Oh no, I'm getting more and more anal about. I don't know if anal is the right word, but I tend to use static typing more and more as well. But it is something that isn't an automatic habit yet with GScript, especially things like this where you have an array. I'm not sure how to define an array of a certain type, and I'm wondering if that even works here, because overlapping bodies returns an array of physics bodies, and it doesn't really care whether it's rigid bodies or kinetic bodies or kinematic bodies or static bodies. It will just return whatever is in range. So I'm not going to waste too much time on that. In this case, it doesn't really matter too much. So that's going to give us our distance to this particular enemy. So if that distance is closer than the last distance that we found, then this becomes our newest closest object. There we go. So now we have found, if there is one, we have found our closest enemy. Okay. No longer care about that pass here. So what we're simply going to do here is, if we have a closest body, actually we're always going to assign that, because if we don't find an enemy, we want to deselect whatever is currently selected to indicate to the user we no longer have a selected object. And then we want to update our target reticle. Now that's going to be a little bit more interesting, and I'm actually thinking about making that a separate function all the way at the end here. So I'm going to go and put that over here. So obviously we need to implement that one in a minute as well. So I'm just going to go targets. Actually, that doesn't need to have a parameter because we have that as a script variable. Let's move that a bit up because I like to have my and actually let's keep it consistent with the naming convention in Godot and say this is a private method, so we're going to start it with an underscore. Alrighty. So the thing that I now want to do is we're going to add an object that allows us to see our selected target. So obviously here what we need to do is have a check for that. So if it's there, we do something. If it's not there, we do something. Well, we actually just hide it. So let's go and add that guy in. And for that, I'm going to do something really weird. I am going to go and add in a node 2D in my 3D script. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want to disjoint this object from my plane itself. I don't want it to move along with my plane. I want it to be related to something else. So we're going to go and add a message instance here. We're going to call that selected target. Boom. And I'm going to add a cube to here. There we go. Beautiful little cube. And I'm going to add a material that I prepared before. There we go, which gives us this little nice selection rectangle thingy. Alrighty, let me have a look. Is there anything else? Oh yeah, I just want to have a quick look at it. So this is a material that I set as transparent. Made sure that we are not removing back faces. Interesting enough, I had to set my albedo texture in order for my emissions to work, and I think that was a problem that we had with emissions before. And then I've added my texture as an emissive texture, so this thing is, well, it's kind of unshaded, but it allows us to, you know, to eventually maybe have some glow around it as well. We'll see. I probably could have just made an albedo texture and then make it an unshaded thing. But yeah. It gives us that little effect that we have, you know, selected corners. And we're just doing that with textures. Oh, the other thing which is really important is when you have a cube in Godot, so you use a cube mesh, the default UV mapping is that our texture is supposed to have 6 sides. So we have our left top, sorry, our left, front, right, bottom, or back, and then bottom and top, all in a single texture. Now this texture is just the texture that's repeated for every phase. So the trick that you do is that in your UV mapping, you multiply your X by 3 and your Y by 2, and that makes that scales the UV coordinates so that with a tiling texture, we get the same texture repeated on every side of our cube. So that's the nice switch, nice little thing to know, that if you want to have a cube where the texture is repeated on every side, you scale your UV by 3 and 2. And if you have a texture that has a separate part for every face, so you have to have this 3 by 2 grid in your texture, then you just leave the UV mapping as is. So that's a nice little trick to be aware of. But yeah, we're using, or abusing, I should say, texture mapping here to create this effect of these little selection corners. This thing very far away is still going to be hard to see, and that's something that we'll need to have a look at later as well. But for now, this allows us to indicate which enemy ship we've got targeted. Now, in the case that we don't have anything targeted, then obviously all that we're going to do is make this thing invisible. In this case, we are going to make it visible. We are also going to Global transform. And this is the reason why I want to call this every frame. Even, you know, well, if we haven't got anything selected, we'll keep marking that as invisible. That shouldn't cost us anything. But in this case, it means that every frame we're going to update this object to be at the location of our target. Now, the last thing that we want to do here is that we want to scale it up. So I actually want to go and add that to a nice little transform there so that we can make some changes. I'm actually wondering, that doesn't have that there. That might actually be a property of the basis, I'm not sure. No, there is, scaled. I could probably do it in single call. We might do it in single call. Get a B. All right. So I think we used this trick last time as well. Selected target. Okay, that's going to be a rigid body, so we need to make sure we're actually going to add that AABB as a method there, but we now need to implement that on both our friendly and our enemy scripts. So we're going to do a func get AABB and we're just going to return an empty AABB object there. And the reason that I'm doing it that way is because this script doesn't actually know what our AABB should be. So we're just going to have that as a template function. But it actually needs to be implemented on our actual object. Let me see. So we're going to start with our bomber scene. There we go. Script. That's still our enemy script, so that we're going to go and extend that. Don't care about any of this. So we're going to override the method in here, and instead of returning an empty AABB, here we can go and get our AABB from our actual mesh. So that will actually return the AABB that we actually want. Now we need to do the same thing, and this is the reason why I'm not fully implementing that in our script. We need to obviously do the same thing over here, where again we have our default script over here. Come on. So we're going to go and extend that, create, boom. And in this case, we need to do a little bit more, because in this case, we're just going to do the fighter. We're not going to care about any of these other things, but we're purely going to go and get the fighter here. And I'm actually wondering if we should not break these things up so that we... I think that probably would be a good idea. So let's finish this. Let's say fighter. I think it's that one. So we're just going to use that one for AABB. That's big enough to encapsulate our fighter. And I'm going to lastly do that with our carrier as well. That's the last one where we need to implement something like this. Boom, ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum. Extend that one. Create. And I guess we could do something in our base script to make it easier, but high res mass. Okay, so that's what we got all in those. So that should be all the things that we currently can select are now returning their sizes. But I'm actually going to go and change this, and I'm going to say select target, new target. Yep, I am going to do it like that. Okay. Bear with me for a second while I clean this up. So, no, that actually is not a good idea. I am going to keep the select target in there, but I am going to do the whole, no, I am going to do the whole transform thing here. The reason why I'm sort of thinking about, you know, should I not overdo this every frame? But because our enemy might be rotating, we have to update the entire transform. So, so we'll finish that in a minute. But I do want to change this to say select target. And the reason I want to do this is underscore select target. Thank you. Boom. There we go. Oops. Okay, there we go. The reason I want to do this instead of just assigning it is I do want to have the action of actually selecting a target available to us so that we can, because obviously we'll be selecting a target here, and we might eventually have other actions that change the selected target. This allows us to do a few things that are that we do a single time. So right now there is nothing that we're going to do here, but I have some little surprises up my sleeve. Okay, so we're still going to get our AABB here. Then we want to, and I'm surprised this one doesn't, hold up. This one, I do want to classify rigid body. So we're always going to have a rigid body there. There we go. And now we should be able to do scaled. And now I want to do AABB dot size dot length. I'm going to do half the length there because that's the complete size. Oh, okay. Yeah, but I do want that. So, boom. Because I want to scale that evenly on all axes. So we're basically going to get the largest size used here, which is fine. And we're going to add that there. We no longer need the pass here. There we go. Last but not least, now I'm going to go and put that in here. Selected just for debugging purposes. That doesn't need to be name. So it means that we're going to go here and say rigid body. Always expecting a rigid body there. So at least that way we see in our little update here if something is working. Because obviously when we're at the start, I'm not expecting anything to be there. Because there is nothing close enough. So now when we go and fly, we're just going to see once it finds something. I'm not sizing the window on purpose this time because I want to be able to see our output. Let's see once we get close enough and it will actually pick them up. If we didn't make, oh, wait, they're over here. All right, so our button is not doing what we expect it to do. Okay. Let's do a little bit more debugging. The first thing that I want to do is I want to, oops, print something to console. Oh, hold on for a sec. No, it's not outputting anything. So we want to go and output something to console. What's the debugger saying? Those are just warnings. I don't care about those. Those are the startup errors because our viewport texture isn't available right away. Entered class body.name. exited. So let's see if our targets work here. Body.name is not an enemy. Body.name. Oh, not the code over there. Is all right. Let's see what that does. All right. I was actually expecting to already see something in our logs. So we definitely don't have our area set up correctly just yet. I need to see if we see something happening when our fighters come close. Not yet. Luckily I put them somewhere straight in front of us. So we will eventually fly into them. There they are. Alright, so our area detection is not yet working. Okie doke. What have we forgotten to do here? So we're monitoring. We've got our masks. Don't care about those guys. Alright. Well, we don't do a gravity override, so there's nothing that we do there. We put our monitoring on. Alright, is there something with our enemy script that we need to do that we've forgotten? Okay, but that's with another rigid body. Let's see if we need to. Let's see if we need to do something with that as well. Get overlapping buttons. Same time. This is modified once during the physics step, not immediately after objects are moved. Consider using signals instead. Alright, so it says that that might be slightly behind. Then again, we're doing it in the process step, so that should already be after our physics is done. So we're not worried about that. Alright. What are we missing? Our collision shape is here, nice and big. It's not disabled, so that's good. What are we not seeing? Well, one thing that I actually want to do that with the friendly script as well. Let's turn can sleep off, just in case that might have something to do with it. And let's turn contact monitoring on. Let's also do the same thing here. Let's see if that makes a difference. Still don't have. No, we should get some immediate response with this. So let me think. Those are all masks. Well, would that work the other way around? Is it checking the layers instead of the other way around? Is that it? Let's see. Is it saying anything about this? Body here. The body are coming either physical body or grid map instance. While grid maps are not physical bodies themselves, they register their tiles with collision shapes of physical, virtual physical bodies. Okay, that's interesting to know. But we still don't have our. Oh, I also want you to be disabled, buddy. Or invisible. I'm not sure about this. Okay. Let's do a few things just to see whether that makes a difference, because maybe the physics bodies need to be able to detect the... No. Okay, what if we do it like this? Maybe it works the other way around than I expect. Normally it's the layer mask that is important. Okay. So we've got everything turned on there, so that can't be it. Mask is friendly and enemies. It shouldn't matter which layer we're in. Yeah, so that's pretty default. Yeah, and that's the one that we're using. Alright, I am starting to get out of ideas. This should be working. Body entered and body exit. What are we missing? I've got a contact monitor on. But that's only when a rigid body hits another rigid body, as far as I'm aware. It's in the layer. This is strange, because this is exactly the same as I've done before. Alright, so... let's see if we are having a problem with the way this is here. No, that's coming across just fine, so our radar should be part of this. Very strange. Let's see if we make this small, whether that makes a difference, you never know. Maybe there's some sort of overflow that's going wrong here. Because we should see our friendlies pop up, and we're not even getting those. Because we've got our friendlies just outside. So here are two friendly ships. So even though we can't select those, it should still see them. But it's not. Bizarre. What am I missing here? What are we not doing? Let's put that back to 1000 because I don't want that to be big. It's not disabled. That isn't there. Our friendly ships are in layer 1. Yeah, layer 1. No, that's just for that stuff. Is there anything else that we need to tick that could have an effect on this? Let's ask Google. Godot area detects rigid body. Alright, that's what you do. Entered, connects, and all that. That's all our standard information for that. Oh, why do we go back into the 2D ones? Okay, so we've got all that in there. It still doesn't tell us what we're doing wrong. I wonder if anybody who's looking at the chat has got any ideas what we're overlooking. It must be something simple, hopefully. Right, so one thing that I want to do is I want to actually run this visible collision shapes. All right. All right, those are all our areas in there. Oops. Yeah, there are collision shapes around. Okay. Let's first see if we actually get this, because maybe we're just barking up the wrong tree. Okay, we're not even getting our button press. That's the wrong one. Okay, that's really interesting. So, for some reason, we're not getting our prints where I'm expecting them to be in our output over here. We're getting them in there. That also means that we need to take those old things out. So maybe it has been working all along and we just weren't looking at the right thing. Alrighty. Where is our Asteroid Scripts? Here we go. And the reason I want to quickly go in here is we have some debug instructions here as well, and I want to get rid of those because they just flood our thing. So let's keep that over there. Let's keep this guy over here. And now we can see we've got a carrier plane and our 3 fighters and also 2 asteroids. That's really interesting because they must be in another thing. But okay, we have got them in our things. So exiting, there we go. So we're picking up a little bit more in our radar than I wanted. Carrier's now far enough away. Very good. There we go. We got our 3 bombers. Okie doke. It looks like things are working the way that they're supposed to. But we don't have our thingy on there. Okay. Well, that means that we just wasted, whatever, 15 minutes looking for something that actually wasn't going wrong. Means I want to turn that one off again. This is all working. I'm pretty happy about that. So we now know that something's going wrong with the logic that we have written over here. Okay, did we actually, oh, we actually selected our bomber there. So that was definitely working. We have a selected bomber, which means that it should be running through this. All right, let's just print test size. Now this is going to go nuts. Because obviously this is going to be called every frame once we select something. But that is fine. Okay. Are we stuck? We are stuck. That's not good. That's a first. Come on. All right, let's restart that. That was a weird run. Here we go. There we go. Script. Did we lose anything here? No, that looks all good. Let's run it again. All right, so if we run it now, it says everything is not an enemy. Very good. All right. Nope, we're not close enough yet. There we go. Up again. All right. That's a little big, possibly. 172. Really? Okay. Why would it come up with a crazy number like that? Let's have a look. Maybe it is true. 1587. No, that's definitely not 175. All right. Size, length. ABB gives us a size, which is the size of our bounding box. In our bumper, we're getting the size of our mesh, which is this guy. All right, so why is it making such a big one? Oops, let me put plane. All right. Let's print our AABB and see if that one makes sense. It's a shame we always have to fly to this thing. There you go. We're getting there. Have a look at our asteroids as well in a minute while we are finding those. Okay. That is very, ah! Okay. Yeah. We're scaling our mesh. So the AABB that we're getting before our transform is applied. So we need to actually adjust those. So we're going to get our AABB before we return it. All right, and now we're going to do AABB dot position, AABB size. That is going to adjust our size. Perfect. Let's see if we need to do the same thing with our other ones. I think there has to be a better way to do that, a more standard way. But for now, I am more than happy to just do it this way. So there's no scale on this guy. There is a scale on this one, so this is the same thing, 0.01. So we need to do the same thing here. We will think of a nicer way to solve that another day. And last but not least, our carrier. That one isn't scaled, so we don't have to worry about a carrier. I think I scaled the mesh itself on the carrier because I'm not using GLTF files there. Oh, that's funky. Our because we're on orthogonal. Alright, there we go. That's better. So, our shadow maps don't work very well in orthographic mode. Oh well, that's okay. I don't mind. Alright. Let's see if it's working now. Now our log is going to go spammy again. Where's my... Oh, there we go. Alright. But why aren't we having more logical values now? We're still not getting what we're expecting. Okay. Let's put this back here. Okay, so one of the things that I'm wondering about, if this scaled, might actually scale the whole transform and not just our rotation. So we're going to go and remove that for now, and what we're going to do is we're going to say t basis is t basis dot scaled vector 3 size. So let's see if that is our problem there. I'll leave that in there for now, but I do want to go and clean up this a little bit because we now know that those things work. We don't need you. I'll leave those two in there. And we're just going to go and have a look at our asteroid script. So our asteroids is in our asteroids layer. Oh, that is the... No, that's the visualization layer. Is that the layer that we added in? Maybe. What are we doing with that? Yeah, so we added our collision layer in here. Where are we applying that? Yeah, here we're creating our static body. And we're setting our collision layer to 0 by default, and we're setting it, when it gets in range, we're setting it to our collision layer. And we're not setting our collision mask, which in this case shouldn't matter. Okay, but that is, hold on, that is our asteroid field. I think what we're detecting is our detect and leave things, and they are, there we go. So we don't care about our collision layer there. Here the same thing. We don't care about you, we just care about the mask. I'm having a feeling that that might have something to do with it. That's a gamble. I'm not sure if that's true. But let's see if that makes a difference. And actually, I think I also know why our output is not working. No, we still have entered asteroids. Exited asteroid. Okay. Hold up a sec. I don't know why that doesn't stop that way. The thing that I'm quickly going to do is I'm going to go and exit this. I'm going to exit this guy. So I have a feeling that those are interrupting our debugging session. I actually want to go and have a quick look over here. Okay. Sounds good. Seems to be working fine. Okay. Just checking up on whether my stream is still working properly, but it seems to be happy. All right, cool. All right. So we still have our asteroids going in, which is really weird. So that's going into layer asteroids. Where's our player script? Yeah. Radar. No, we're not detecting asteroids. So yeah, I'm not quite sure about that one. That looks really weird. Yeah, look, our debugging is working. So we had our other copy of Godot running, and that was obviously causing our debugging to not work properly. All right. Oh, that wasn't quite what I had in mind. Oh well. We found it yet? Nope. Not close enough yet. Okay, where are these guys? Here. Okay. So that is really strange. What are we still not doing right? Oh. Okay, this time we're not even getting our print test. So would it be just damage this when we cleaned it up? Because we should see that we selected this guy. I guess so. Okay. Let's try this again. We'll get there in the end. Probably should put those enemy fighters a bit closer. There's a long flight every time. But I'm just having a look at my outputs, seeing when we can see that our enemy ships are going to get close enough. There we go. We have our numbers, but now, oh, I do need to go and press the right button. And look at that. We have that. So, okay. I kept pressing the button for firing missiles instead of finding the closest fighter. Okay, so we know that one works. I am going to leave that one in there because that's only going to run once. We're going to take that one out because that's just really ridiculous. Okay. So let's go and implement our cycle targets. So here we want to go from the one that is currently selected to the next one in our array. And the order is just going to be whatever they are in that array. I'm not going to sort that or anything. I think that's just crazy. I don't think that's really needed. So let's go and have a quick look at the help for array, whether we can find something inside of our array and then find what the next one is. Finds the index of an existing value or the insertion index. That's the value is not yet present in the array using binding search. So that's right. False. The returned index comes after all existing entries. Finds the index of an existing value. If the value is not yet present in the array. Maintains sorting order. Okay, that's not what we want. We just want to find. No, I just want to find a position. So just find. Okay, cool, perfect. That's what we want. I want to find if something is in there. Alrighty. Where's my input script? Here's my no, not input script. My plain script. All right. So here we're going to say if we already have a selected target, we are going to go and find it, and else if overlapping real size. So we have to have something in there, else there's no point. Select targets overlapping. So we just want to get the first entry in our array. So if we don't have anything selected, we just select the first one, and that now includes our friendly targets as well. Now in this case, we want to say if my int index is overlapping dot find selected target. So we're gonna find our selected target. And here we're going to say if index, now was it 0 that it returned if it didn't find anything? Or -1? -1 if not found. Okay, cool. So if that is -1, if we don't find it, we're just going to select the first one. We're happy about that. Then if index, let's make an else if. Why did it not like this, by the way? Ah, it's not C plus. There we go. Okay. Index smaller than overlapping size -1. So if we're anything except for the last entry, then we're simply going to select index +1. So we're just going to select the next target in our list. Now, finally, in our else, that means that we're neither -1. Now, actually, that's a good one. We don't care about that. Because if it's -1, -1 plus 1 is 0, we would still end up selecting the first one. So, I'm actually going to do it like this. Boom. So basically, if our index is not the last entry in our array, including if we don't find it, in which case it's -1, we're going to select the next one. So if we find entry 5, we're going to select entry 6. If we don't find it, -1, we're going to select entry 0. Now, if we do have the last entry, we're going to cycle back to the first entry. So that's why we do a select overlapping 0 here. So in any case, when we need to do that. If we don't have anything in our overlapping logic, and that's why I was actually thinking about moving this one to the top. Would we ever get in here? Yeah, I think we should do that. So we're going to say if we actually have overlapping items, Yes, yes. Then this can just become an else. So, selected target. There we go. Is it now happy? Now it's happy. Put one more there. Very good. All right. So that should mean that we should be able to select all the things close to us as well. So we should be able to see here when we do select something. So we can't select our enemy yet, but we can. I've got the carrier selected. Ooh. Okay. So we've got ourself in there as well. So obviously I'm wondering if that is because I've put this back in the layer 1, because that was obviously one of the tests that we did. It's like it's ignoring my mask. Okay, so that's weird. So it is detecting both what's selected in our layer and what is selected in our mask. Now we no longer have our asteroids in there. Maybe it's because it works the other way around at that point in time, because those things detect the player layer. So it is now the asteroids and the player actually detecting the radar. So anyway, that was a weird one. So now we can select our carrier, fighter 1, fighter 2, fighter 3, and we go back to our carrier. So in fighter 1, we can already see there. I'm actually going to go and put my headset on for a minute and make this one nice and big. I want to see this when we're flying around. Center our camera. So we can see that we have our little guy selected over there. And now if we go outside and we do selection. So now we're selecting that guy, we're selecting that guy, we're selecting up the carrier. That's a nice big one. And we're selecting that guy again. All right. Let's find our bad guys. So these guys are a bit further off. So yeah, we don't have any visual indication that we're selecting anything. That's going to be the next thing that we're going to do. Come on, where are our bad guys? They're hanging around here somewhere. Oh, there we go. Look at that. So it's always selecting the first one there. So obviously if I fly on the other side, we should get that one selected. So I'm pressing the button right now to select the closest enemy fighter. But I can also go and cycle through with my other button. That's pretty cool. All right. Cool. So next thing that we're going to do, that's going to be a little bit more funky. A little bit more fun. Although that's going to be interesting to see how well we can do that. I'll do that with the get mesh. Okay. So same idea as with our get AABB. I also want to have a func get mesh. Return. We're going to return. Actually, we're going to return a null here. And I actually want to go and define this as we're returning a mesh. Do that here as well. Make sure that we always define that we're returning an AABB, which means we need to do that over here as well. AABB. This makes you wonder if we shouldn't have a script that both the enemy and friendly script extend from, so that we have some of this defined in like a base class, but I think that's a little bit overkill. All right. So we have those in there. So I want to use those to return our mesh object that actually is our enemy or our friendly, depending on what we select. So let's go and return that properly. And then here we're going to do get mesh. And we're actually going to return high-res mesh. We're going to actually return a copy of the mesh that we're rendering there. It'll be very funny. I think with the carrier we're going to have a bit of problems because of how big it is. But then again, we could eventually have a low-res version of our mesh here. I don't know if our Does that carrier have a low quality version? That would be in assets. We have a low poly version of our carrier. Let's see what that looks like. Let us see what that looks like. All right, so there's our high. Boom. Let's move that out of the way. Load assets. CD trader, carrier, low. It's not just low poly, it's also very, very tiny. Why is that very, very tiny? Because we never scaled that one up. Oh, maybe I did that in my settings. That's possible. Let's have a look. I scaled it up here. Okay, let's do the same thing with the low poly one. Re-import. Ooh, all right. That's not too shabby. Hey, that's cool. All right, we're taking a little detour, and we're going to go and make this one. Oops. Was that minus 90 on this one? Yes, it was. There we go. We've got our high poly mesh and our low poly mesh, and our. Okay, let's go and set up all our materials properly. So these have a whole bunch of materials. Let's actually go and move that to the top here. Obviously, we're going to center that in a minute. But I want them side by side for now. So, whole white. This is going to be a little bit of back and forwards. Paste. Copy. Paste. Copy. Paste. I think we were at 3. Yes, we were. Paste. Copy. Bear with me, I'll be right through this, I'm sure. 6, I think we're at. This one's going to be really interesting to see if that indeed. I'm glad that they match up, because else it would have been a whole lot of more work to figure it out. So yeah, that is a bit of a simpler ship, isn't it? All right, oh, that's pretty cool. All right, let's go for 7. Copy. Paste. Copy. I hope you guys are still watching, because it is pretty quiet in the chat. Okay, now interestingly enough, we have 9 materials here, but we have 2 extra ones here. All right, so let's go have a look here and see if our materials match. A whole gray, whole white, dark gray, emit cockpits. So here we have emit white. Let's probably sell the same thing. Tarmac, tarmac, emit orange, yep. Emit kind, that's that one, yep. Glass. Yeah, all right, that's right. It's always one off. So this is our emit orange. Yeah, okay, we got emit orange. What have we got here? Emit white. All right. Interesting. So here, that one was called emit cockpit. I don't know what that's used for and why that's different. And here we go, hologram. What is the hologram? That's probably that little ball. That one's Cayenne in the high res one. So that's interesting. That's, see, it's there. Well, you know, it's a simple model, but it's working. Yeah, I'm happy about using that. Okay, so that's going to be low res mesh. Okay, no. I just want to go over this. We're going to move that to 0, which is, I think, the same thing where we have this one. Yep. Now I actually want to get my 3 lights. And we're just going to go and move that over there. We're going to hide that one. So I do want to have that around. We're just not going to render it for now. And that means that we're now going to use our low-res mesh. And we probably are going to remove our high-res one. Didn't want to interrupt. Hi, Paul. Thank you. No, it's, you know, a little bit of feedback is always good. Making sure that I'm actually talking to someone, which is always nice to know. Okay, so that's going to be really interesting to see how well that does help our performance. Because even though it does look a little bit less detailed, there's more than enough detail here for it to look cool. So I'm very happy about that. All right, very cool. All right, so we'll have our high-res mesh hidden for now, but we probably will remove that. It's exactly the same scale, so everything still lines up, which is really cool as well. All right, so let's continue with putting all our changes into our script. So we now need to look at this guy. So again, we're going to go for ABB. Now with our get mesh, I'm not going to do anything to scale it because we will end up scaling it properly as we're using it. Oops, mesh. Return fighter. I don't know why that wasn't auto-completing. Probably I'm trying to be too fast. Okie doke. So we're going to return that one there, and for a bumper, again, let's go and class that func get mesh return mesh. All right, cool. So now we have a way to access the mesh of the selected target, and we can reuse it. It's really cool. And the way that we're going to be reusing that is we are going to go and add a select mesh instance into here. And I'm going to go and move that up. And I'm going to call that selected mesh. Now we're not going to position this here. We're just going to be placing it here because we need to position this in our extended scene. So let's go to our fighter scene. It's not in there, the one in the player. I'm not going to bother with the interceptor right now. I'm going to be doing it with this guy. Now, the thing that I want to do here is I actually want to show the selected mesh as a hologram. Now, one of the things that we could do, which is what we see in a lot of these sort of games. Well, I am way up. Hold on, let's just do. I always forget what the key combos is here. There we go. Now we can. That's Shift F, by the way, that I press so that we can sort of move around. All right, let's press Shift F again. So what we see in a lot of games like these is that we would use one of these monitors to render a 2D image of our selected target, which is something we could do here right now as well, is actually do something with these screens. But my idea was always to really make use of VR to the fullest. And one of the really cool things in VR is obviously having a 3D placed object somewhere. So we're pretending that, say, this screen is going to be our targeting screen, but instead of it just be a screen in the background, it's actually a projector projecting forward. So we're going to show our selected screen hoovering slightly in front of that, but using a different material to make it look like it's glowing. And that is what we're going to be building right now, is whatever thing that we've got selected, we're going to have a mini version of that just floating in front of us. Now, when we're much further along with this, I actually want to have some ships designed specifically for our game, and we're obviously going to have that UI element embedded in our ship's design. So instead of having 2D monitors in our ship, we're actually going to have something that indicates like, hey, I've got a projector here. I've got something that projects this selected entity so that I can actually look at it. And we're probably also eventually going to look at, okay, if our enemy takes damage or something like that, we might see shield indications there as well, or something like that. We'll see how that ends up. So for that to work, we have to go and select our selected mesh, which will be somewhere over here, and we have to move that into position. Okay, so I'm going to do my Shift F thing again, so we can go into our cockpit. It's not the most intuitive way of doing it. So like I said, we're just going to pretend that that screen is emitting our mesh. So we're just going to place it over there. I think that would do just great. Yeah, I think that'll do just fine. Okie doke. All right. Cool. And now we need to go and set this up. And this is why I wanted to have our select target method, because this is really where we only want to do this once. We don't want to do this every frame. Just when we select something, we want to have this done. When we deselect something, we're obviously going to go and remove it. And that reminds me, do we have a deselect in here? We actually want to make sure that if we don't have any overlapping bodies here, just in case, we obviously want to deselect. We already have that here, because if we never find a closest body, our closest body remains null, so we're going to just send null to that. But in this case, if we can't find the next target in our the targets that we found, because there are none, we obviously want to deselect anything. Now, there shouldn't be anything anymore at that point in time, but just in case there is, we want to deselect that. So in this case, what we're going to be doing is selected mesh visible is false. But not only that, I also want to free the mesh that we're seeing here, so that we're not hanging on to a mesh that we no longer want. It also means that obviously in our plane here, we want to default that to be not visible. We're going to make that visible when we need it. So here we now need to go and say selected mesh.mesh is selected target. Now, one thing that is important here is I'm not doing any sort of duck typing or anything like that to make sure that these get AABB and get mesh functions are actually available. We're purely trusting on the fact that we will only have enemy and friendly ships that can be found by our radar. And because those are always extended from our enemy and friendly scripts or scenes, we have those methods available. They might give us an empty mesh at that point in time, but we should have those available. So that is the assumption that we're making here. We might put some protections in place at some point, because if we get it wrong, if we forget something, we could end up crashing our game. It's always this balance between putting something together fast and not doing overly crazy checking, and making sure that things work. So let's actually move that up. We now have our mesh that we assign to this, but this is going to be a really, really big mesh. So here we're going to do exactly the same as we do here, although we can now take a shortcut. Actually, you might want to make sure that we have our mesh. So if mesh. So in this case, If we didn't get a mesh, we should, but if we don't get it, we're going to hide it. And obviously here we're going to assume that we've got the rest set up. So there we go. For our size is going to be, oops, that was a bit too much. Let's copy that. So in this case, we can call our get AABB directly on there. And in this case, I want the original size. I don't want our adjusted size. I want our original size of the mesh. And we're going to go and get that longest vector that we want here. So for our carrier, that's going to be really big. For our other things, it's going to be smaller. We will see. Okay, and that means that we're going to go and apply that size as a scale. But I want to go and remember that because we will end up rotating our little our thingy. So what we're going to do over here is actually, yeah, selected mesh scale float 1. So we're going to go and calculate that. Now, let's say that we're going to make that one 10 centimeters big. So we're just going to take 10 centimeters and divide it by the actual size that we have right now, and that should scale it nicely down to something that is always a similar size. That might be too big, that might be too small. We'll be seeing that pretty quickly. All right. For our selected mesh rotates. Okay. So what we now want to do is create a new transform. Form is transform. Boom. Now the other thing that I'm wondering about, actually, that's the thing. That's something that we're actually going to do in the update. So boom, we're going to leave it there. And in our update, if we have a selected target, we're going to go and do that. But we're also going to do it should be visible because those things go hand in hand, but let's just double check. We're going to go, oh, I actually want my delta in here. So let's go and send our delta to our updates. There we go. Which can obviously become a float. All right, selected mesh rotates. We're just going to add delta into that. That might be too fast, that might be too slow. We will soon see. Yeah, all right, Paul, no problems. Thanks for being here, and good night. I hope you have a good night's rest. We're not going to go on too long. It's already 12 o'clock here, so I just want to get this part finished, and I think that's where we'll leave it tonight. So we're going to increase our rotate value here. Now I can do my transform, and in here we first want to go T is actually we can do that in this. Oh, really? Oh, well, we will reuse it then. So we want to go and, oh yeah, we don't need to do that because we already have that defined. Thank you. So rotate it around our up vector. We're going to rotate it by our selected mesh rotate, and then we're going to get the scaled version of that with selected mesh scale. So that gives us now a transform that is nicely rotated the way that we want. Oh yeah, of course, that needs to be a vector 3. Always forget. And in this case, let's make our life a little bit nicer. And let's do this again. Just for readability. All right. Cool. Now we want to put our origin point. Selected mesh dots transform dot origin, because obviously we don't want to lose. Actually, that's easier. We can actually make this basis. So var b basis. We don't have to update our whole transform. We just need to do the basis. So we can now do selected mesh transform basis is b. There we go. And we could have actually assigned that directly. Maybe we should do that, because we don't need any intermediate ones. We can just do that directly. There we go. That's perfect. All right. Let's see how that works. All right. We're going to go zoom that out. All right. Okay. Oh, there we go. Ooh. Okay, something bad happened. Okay. BB dot size dot length. That was funky that it actually still had my camera working. I would have expected that to break completely. All right, let's try this again. Take a large first. Okay. So, all right. So we have our ship, but obviously it's not doing our rotation. There's that guy. Cool. All right. So it is working. But we have to figure out what to do about that. That's a good one. It'd be nice if our mesh was actually properly rotated to begin with. Okay. That's a shame. Oh, let's carry GD. Carry a C. So that's our problem with this being rotated by 90 degrees. Now we unfortunately don't have any way to fix that in our imports. Because that would be really cool if we had rotation options in here. Do I want to add another function that allows us to rotate this thing? That's the big question. I guess we can. Well, for the sake of getting something to work, that's what we're going to do right now. But I do think that there is a nicer way to deal with this. But I don't want to waste that much more time on getting where I want to be tonight. So, we're just going to call that get basis for our mesh. We're going to go and return a normal basis because that's good enough for all the other ones. So we're going to do that over here as well. So we don't actually have to implement that except for our carrier. And in this case, we want to do var b is basis. Oh, actually, we can do that like this. Return dot rotated vector 3 dots. I guess it's that one. Minus 90. Okay, why is that not happy? Bases. Rotated axis. Oh, no, come on. Okay, so that I guess is not what I thought it was. So I think it's that one. Might be right that we need to use. We'll see that quickly enough. Then we go in here, no, in here, which means that we're also going to do foreign selected mesh bases. And again, I think we desperately need to clean that code up. I don't really like all these access methods, but for now, we will deal with it that way. So selected mesh bases is selected get bases. So we're going to go and get that one. And now we're going to use that to do our rotation with. So instead of creating a new basis here, we're going to always start with that basis. And that's then going to be further rotated and further scaled. Let's see how that works. No, I can't wrap it in another spatial because we're grabbing our mesh. We're not grabbing a mesh instance. So that makes life a little bit harder. But we're getting there. All right. There we go. And okay, we are crashing again. What is it not complaining? Get bases in mesh. Okay, yeah, that's not smart, is it? That wasn't what I had in mind. I need to call it on this one. There we go. Helps if you call it on the right object. Alrighty. There. Oh, and it is. Well, that's because I did left instead of right. That's still working fine. That's all we have. It's pretty cool how it's lighted by the screen, but why is it at that weird angle? Let's go back to our carrier. No, I did put 90 there. So right will give it. Actually, you can keep that left. You know what? I'm just gonna go and do this. All right, let's just see how that works. I'm not even gonna put my headset on. I just want to see if the orientation makes sense now. It's still at 45 degrees. How weird is that? Why is it at 45 degrees? Okay. That is really, really weird. Okay. What I want to do, just to get this figured out, I'm going to go and just do the scale. I'm not going to apply the rotation thing. Let's see how that works. See, it is at 45 degrees. What is going on? And if I... let's move that back in. Let's just see if that corrects it. Just want to see if it's still up right now, as I would expect. Yeah. It's upright. We didn't accidentally rotate it, did we? We only moved it. So, geometry, no, that's wrong. Oh, that's in my standard one. I need to look over here. No, it's only positioned, it's not rotated. Could it just seem to be at an angle? I don't know. I don't know. Let's just see if we can find an angle that works. Oh. Thank you, Rahul. You are absolutely dead on the money. Okay, it's late. It's yeah, it's late. You are absolutely dead right. Degrees to red. Boom. All right. Let's see if that does what it's supposed to do. It's getting too late, guys. It is getting too late. There we go. Perfect. All right. Is it upside down? Is there anything that I still need to do? Look at. Let's go. Oh, where's my buttons? It is upside down. It's pretty cool. A mini little carrier. All right. Okay. My frame rate's still horrible at the moment. So for whatever reason, even though we got a low poly, oh, that's probably because we still got that running in the background. That's all right. We'll figure that out in a minute. Okay. So that's fixed that one. Then the only thing that I now still want to do is create a nice little material for this thing. All right. We're just going to go create a temporary scene. We're going to go and load in our carrier, our low poly one. I'm going to rotate that by. Oh yeah, we were also supposed to go and do this. There we go. All rotate. Oh, no. I know when it does that. There we go. I want to save my script. I don't want to save the scene. This is just a temporary scene that I just want for a second. All right, so I'm happy enough to scale that down because for this experiment, we don't really care. Boom. There we go. We've got our mini little carrier there. No, I don't want to save that. I'm too automatic with pressing save. Yeah, use pi divided by 2. I could do a poll, but I like that to rad function. It just communicates better what we're doing. It's easier to read. It's just a personal preference. All right, let's go and do this as a shader material. Let's do something funky, and we're going to do visual shader. I haven't used visual shaders yet in this project, so might as well have some fun with that. Flags. So. All right. Now I have to remember how this works because I haven't done this for a while yet, but I want to do a Fresnel shader. Boom. All right. Now I believe if you don't put any inputs, it's going to do the default work there. Okay. So we want to go and mix that in. I want to have a vector mix, I think. No, I actually want to go and plug that into alpha. No, come on, plug that into alpha. That one. Perfect. Now I want to have an albedo color, and and we're going to add in a color uniform there. Boom, 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 boom. Let's see, actually, no, I want to plug that. Let's see, can I, oh, no, I can't do that. Can I do it like, not normal, where are you? Emission. I want to throw that into emission. And I actually want our albedo color to be a color constant. There we go. And that can indeed just be white. So we're putting white in. So look at that. That just doesn't show anything. That's a bit of a shame. So that's our color input, which we haven't set yet. Oh, we don't have an eye on the output. Oh, well, that's a shame. So let's go and reorganize this a little bit more. It doesn't really matter too much. It's going to be a really simple little shader graph. Shader resource. No, I don't care about you. Shader parameter. Boom. We are going to make that a nice little can. There we go. Perfect. All right. So cool. Maybe a little bit more towards blue. Cool. More than happy about that. All right. Let's go and save that. Models, no, I don't want to put it there. Yeah. All right, I'm going to spell that wrong, am I not? Do I still have it in here somewhere? 1M. Okay, that's actually the material. Now, probably should rename that. Okay, I don't care about you. Go away. I just needed to get the material. Ooh. All right, scripts. Back to our plain scripts. And what we're going to do here is we're going to add in a var selected material. It's going to be a material preload. And that's going to be, I'm going to rename that now because this is actually on the shader. This is our material. Boom. All right. So I went a little bit fast with that. So I'm just going to quickly go back to this and quickly look at what we're actually doing here. Yes, what is Fresnel? Okay. So I'm putting into my albedo just white, and the reason I'm doing that is because I found out that emission seems to only work if you also have an albedo color. Probably in this case, because we do have a default albedo color, it probably wouldn't matter. But I want it to emit whatever color we're setting here, which in this case is that blue color. Now our Fresnel, which I'm applying to our alpha to make it translucent, the higher the value is. The Fresnel is basically doing a calculation of the, when I have a plane, of the angle going, of the light going in compared to, no, the angle of what I'm looking at it to the normal of the plane. And the closer they are, the higher the Fresnel. The lower that it is, the more flat we are, the lower the... I think it's the other way around. I think if they're parallel, Fresnel is 0. And when they are perpendicular, it becomes Fresnel value becomes 1. So what you can see here, for instance, with our sphere here, is when we're looking straight at our sphere, we can actually see through our sphere, but our edges of our sphere become visible because we are getting that value in there. So if I would, just for fun, let's actually create a mix, because that was what I wanted to do initially. Do I actually have something that I can multiply color with? That's the thing. No, it's only Vec 3. All right, so I do need to use that mix. That's a bit annoying. All right, we'll do mix. Boom. We're gonna go. No, not a scalar mix. Mix a color mix. It's this one. Boom. We're gonna put that one in there. I'll put that one in there. Boom. And I don't want my alpha anymore. So boom. And let's go and make these all 0. Why does that not work? Do I need to press enter? I need to press enter. And that's because we still have our emission. So boom. So here you can see that with that Fresnel mixing white with black, let's see. Yeah, I'm putting A, B, and C. So it's A, my mix value? I guess so. But we can see that our object is darker where it's facing us, and it's lighter as it's facing away. So it's a really cool little effect that we can use to kind of fake like a glowy outline on an object, and that's really what I'm going for here. So let's just put this back the way that it was before we started being a little bit nutsy with this. Oops. So again, I think if I do that, that's interesting. Oh, that's because I haven't got a color set. So I actually don't think that I need that one, but I'm going to leave that in just in case. So let's go and have a look at what that does in our game. So we messed around enough with this guy. Save. We're going to go into our plane scripts. Let's go and zoom that out because we're getting a little crazy with that. So we just want to apply that material as an overall to all the surfaces on our mesh. So we've assigned our mesh here to our mesh instance here. So what we just need to do here is for surface in range 0, selected mesh dot mesh surface. I always forget get. I always forget what that thing is called. Mesh instance. There we go. Get surface material count. Okay. Get surface material count. So why is it not a? Oh, because I'm not on the right scene. There we go. Let's see if we now get our. There we go. Now it's auto completing. Semicolon. So we're going to loop through our surfaces, and now we're going to do, and we're going to say selected mesh dot set. Oops. Surface material surface comma selected mesh material. Boom. That's going to override that one. Yeah, exactly. So because it's the Fresnel value will return a value between 0 and 1. Yeah, it is a reflection simulator. The Fresnel is actually used in your reflection calculation when you're looking at shiny surfaces, reflective surfaces, and we're just abusing it here. We're just making some nice use of it. Range should be without a capital. There we go. That's a function. Okay, cool. Alrighty. Let's see if I've done everything right. So let's go back into here. We don't want to have any effect of that. So let's have a look. Boom. So we still have a relatively low frame rate in our when we're in our carrier, which is really annoying. There is our little shippy thing. So that sort of looks translucent right now. We might need to power it down a little bit. Let's see how the other ones look. Oh, that's pretty cool. That does really look like a little hologram thing. And of course, the other ones look the same. So I think that this one's going a little overpowered because it's such a high detailed model. Oops. Ah, I knocked it there. All right. Let's see what happens when we select our little enemy ships. All right, so when we've got light from outside, it actually really looks very cool. Okay, oops, we don't have anything to select anymore because we're too far away now. So that's something that we still need to build, is that when we go out of range of something that we can select. Oh, that is cool. I like that. All right, so where are our guys? Even though we now have something that selects them, I'm still losing them in, like, there's too many things around. So that's the other thing that we need to do, is have some sort of visual indicator of where our selected target is. I wonder where he is, actually. Maybe we're just still too far away from them. No, we think we've passed them. So where are these guys? Oh, we're already too far away from them already. Okay. Let's go closer. See if we can pick them up again. Oh, there you are. There you go. All right. Yeah, that's really cool. All right. So, we might need to move it a little bit more to the left to make it really look like it's coming out of that screen, but other than that, that is really cool. We have our logic to select our enemies and to select our friendly targets. Where is our carrier gone? There it is. I want to go back to our carrier. Just want to have a look at what our frame rate does when we get closer to our carrier, because I'm still surprised that now that we have the lower poly carrier, that it is still giving us a drop in frame rate when we get too close. Maybe it's the material. That's the other thing. You know, I put some pretty nifty materials on this thing. So maybe with all the effects that the materials have, we might have some. Oh, we're keeping steady frame rate now, because this was usually when we started losing our frame rate. Yeah, so when we're on the outside, we're okay. No, it looks like whenever we see the inside of our carrier, it's no. Right now it is needed to go down again, so I wonder why. Well, maybe it's just because we're now showing our little preview. Maybe that does have something to do with it, because obviously we are showing the whole carrier model in its full glory in that little translucent way. That can't be cheap. Yeah, because our frame rate stays pretty decent right now. Let's see if we can get back into the hangar. Flying a little crazy at the moment. No, we definitely get some frame rate drop when we're looking into the hangar. So I really wonder what. Whoops, collision shapes. I really wonder what we're doing when we're looking into that. Whether it's all those small little platforms, or whether it's something to do with the materials that we're seeing here. I really wonder what is so special about this view that makes it lose its frame rate. Oh, well, I guess it is what it is. That thing is really cool, though. I'm really happy about that effect. That is really cool. Oh, are we really that far away already? I think we need to make our radar actually go a bit further. I just wanted to get our little carrier there. So because there's so much detail in this thing, we've made this thing transparent. I think there's a lot of overlap in polygons, which is causing it to almost look like a solid model. But it is really cool. I am really happy with the end result of that. Alrighty. Cool, guys. It is nearly 1 o'clock, so we've been going for well over 2.5 hours. I think we are at a really good spot with this right now. So, did I just move something? Hold on, just want to double check if I didn't just move my carrier. Ah, that should be good. All right. I can actually see that if we focus on this guy. Is this guy still properly? Yeah, he's still over there. Oh yeah, that was one last thing that's kind of cool to see. And we'll be doing more of that as well. Is I actually animated the landing gear opening and closing. Let's make that. Get the output. There we go. Can you see the landing gear? So you're never gonna see that because it's obviously underneath the craft that we're in. But I thought that was a nice little detail that was animated in the original thing. Now, one thing that I find strange about this model is that the glass of the cockpit is actually loose as well, but the back part and the front part are part of the same model. So you can't open this canopy separate from that canopy, and it looks really weird when you try to do that, which is a bit of a shame because I would have liked if we have this plane sitting inside of the dock to have the thing actually open, so we can see people getting in or out of the of these planes. Anyway, actually, the last thing that we'll do before we call that a night is go back into our carrier. We actually don't need this guy anymore. So I don't think that does anything because obviously if something's hidden, it shouldn't be rendered. Let's just satisfy my curiosity here and see. No, we're still getting 50, 55 frames per second inside. So there's really something about being inside of this area that, for whatever reason, is just costing performance. I don't know what. But again, I think I explained this in earlier. Thanks, Jalos. How do you use this background for your green screen? Oh, first of all, I'm not actually using a green screen right now. I'm using this thing called, what is it? I forgot what it's called. XSplit VCam. Because my green screen is actually, if I put it up behind me, it would actually block the sensors of my index headset. So that's why I'm not using that. I do plan to do something about that at some point because while the XSplit VCam is fun to use, it's not really that that solid. The image that you see is a picture of my room. So that is actually my room that you're seeing there, and I'm just using that because from this camera angle, it's really a mess behind me, and I don't really want that mess to be online. So I don't have a lot of space in this house. So if I ever get the ability to dedicate a complete room to this hobby and properly decorate it, I'll probably just not even have a green screen. I'll just show my room behind me. But for now, it's all I can do. A top-down scan-like effect. You mean like to see like a force field? Yeah, we could probably do something like that. The problem that I have is, like I said, this model I really am treating this as a stand-in model. what I really want to get to at some point is that we have a proper interior of a carrier for our selection screen. So right now, when we start this thing, we are immediately inside of our plane, ready to fly out. And obviously, that's not what we want. We want to have an actual interior of the carrier that we're living in, because that's going to be the main living space in our game, where we get our briefings, where we talk to our other pilots, where basically the story progression happens. And then when the briefing's done and a mission actually starts, I just want the plane that you're in to be launched from a launch tube. So instead of being inside of this big carrier area, I want to more think of games like Battlestar Galactica, or movies like Battlestar Galactica, where the Vipers are shooting out of these launch tubes at the side, and you have got these landing areas where you land. You're never really inside of the big hangar when you are flying around. So that means that the carrier that you see will actually will not have an interior while you're flying in the game. You would only have an exterior, and you would just have the launch tube that you've been launched out of, and possibly a landing area that you can end, where you end the mission. And I want that because when you look at a game like this and the sort of scale that you're playing at, the amount of time that you spend inside of this hangar area is, you're there for the first 3 seconds of the game, and after that you're flying outside, and you're never going to see that detail that's inside, which means that if that detail is causing the game to be slow, is causing our frame rates to drop because we're just overpowering it for whatever reason. And again, I do want to find out what that actually is, because with this lower poly model, there shouldn't be a reason for it to have these frame drops anymore. So that's definitely something that I need to look into and figure out. Is it something in the materials that I use? Is, whatever the case may be. But I want to avoid the problem altogether, because that also means that in the hands of an artist, you model the outside of these capital ships a lot simpler, and you do a lot more texturing to bring the detail in, and all of a sudden, a lot of these problems just go away. And that's going to be important when we get to a point where we won't just have one ship. We'll have our carrier, and we might have a whole support fleet around it, or we might eventually attack an enemy, and we have a whole enemy fleet to attack. And obviously, at that point in time, you still want to have very cool, high detail looking spaceships, but you don't want to blow the poly count buffer and cause things to be slow. So that is the end goal here, where we're really not going to deal with an interior of the carrier in our game mode, in the actual flying mode. Again, in our story part of this, where you get your mission briefings and where you go into, I'm looking at ideas from games like Wing Commander and Star Lancer and things like that, where you really have several locations on the carrier that you can visit, which each have a part to play in the story, be it the cantina, or be it an observatory, or being the bunks, or being the actual place where they maintain the ships, be it the briefing rooms. So there's going to be a whole bunch of locations that we can visit, where we can have story progression. That's still weeks away from now. I'm not even close to that. But those are the sort of things that I've penned down, and I'm thinking about, okay, what do I want as components to make this a complete game? Right now, we're just concentrating on actually being able to fly around and having all the components that we need to actually put a mission together. And we're only just starting, so we still have a long road to go. So yeah, I think that is going to be it for tonight. We now have the ability to detect which enemies and friendlies are in range of our radar. Might expand our radar a little bit. We have got the ability to select targets. We have the ability to see the selected target as a hologram in our ship. there's a lot more to do there. You know, obviously that hologram I want to extend with information about the ship that you selected. So you can see, we may change the color depending on whether it's a friendly or an enemy. You might make it red for an enemy and green for a friendly or something like that. We'll see what works. So that is something that we're going to play with. We'll eventually do things with shields. So obviously we're going to have our enemies take damage. We're going to have our friendlies take damage from our enemies. We want to be able to see that so that we can check out on our wingman, see if our wingman isn't too damaged, check out on our enemy targets and quickly go after enemy targets. So there's a lot of stuff that we still want to add there. I think the first thing that we're going to do next week, or maybe even I might do that during the week, I'm not sure yet, is that once you've got something selected, that we get some sort of direction indicator. The other thing is actually creating a radar. So if we go into our player, we obviously somewhere over here, be it, I'm guessing that we're going to be doing that from our center console for now. We want to have our 3D radar projection so that we can actually see, everything that's within our radar sphere, which things are close, which things are far away, and guide us to our enemies. And we obviously want to have some sort of indication in our view that we know that if the selected enemy that we have is above us or behind us, have some sort of indication of which way do we need to go to find that enemy. Not quite sure yet what I'm going to do there. I think the topic of next week is going to actually be firing some stuff at our little bombers. Let's see if we can blow them up. I'm thinking about adding 2 types of weapons to the ship. One is missiles. I'm probably going to do that first because that will allow us to do our first bit of AI. We're going to build a very simple bit of AI to control our missiles. And after that, we'll just do our guns. Our guns are going to be really straightforward. Just projectiles that just shoot out at front and they go until they hit something. So they're going to be real simple. After that, we're going to start looking at shields and shield effects and seeing, how can we make it look funky when we actually hit an enemy. So no, the asteroids actually are fine, especially after the changes that I've done. Is you can actually see it right here. If I've got almost all the asteroids in view here. Where's my yes? Oh, this is going to be limited to 60 because we are on desktop here. So I'll just run it one more time just to show how well that works. Because once we're outside, let's have a look. Here we go. So once we're outside of a ship, and we still, there you go. My glasses are always getting in the way. So we can see pretty much the whole asteroid field here. And I'll go to the other end so that we really get a good view of the whole thing. But you can see that we've got a good 90 frames per second. So even if I look out at all the asteroids over there, it stays nice and solid. So it is not our asteroids, which I'm quite happy about. That's something that we didn't have solved last week, but that is all working fine right now. So yeah, that's the plan for next week. We'll start looking at some things to shoot and start doing some simple logic there. And then probably, depending on how far we get next week, the next cap of the rank is writing some very simple AI for our bombers to actually try and attack us. Obviously, I'm misusing them. They're bombers. We're going to be using them as enemy fighters. We just need to have something to start with. So plenty of things to do, plenty of things to improve. But I think that's going to be it. So unless anybody has any more questions, I'll wait for a minute or two because there's always a nice delay in our good friends YouTube. But yeah, it's way past time for me to go to bed. So, hope you guys have enjoyed it so far, and are finding this little journey exciting. I'm definitely having a lot of fun with this. It's quite interesting to see that even on a low poly. I wonder how much I've done with the whether I've gone overboard on the materials on this thing. Let's have a quick look at the bigger ones. So yeah, I've got my roughness and metallic and stuff. And there's a normal map on there, but that's about it. It's pretty standard. You know, I could probably get rid of the metallic here, because it's pretty much all metallic. And I don't think you'll ever really see the roughness on these. So I could try and take those off and see if there's any improvement there, but I'm not sure if there's any use to that. Anyway, I think that's it, guys. Thank you all for watching. Like I said, I hope you guys have enjoyed it. We have made some really cool progress tonight. So, yeah. Thank you all, and have a great night, or great day if it's early for you. And I hope to catch you next week, same time. So, goodbye. Let's see, is it all through? This is the downside. I don't know whether I can stop the stream or whether you guys are still watching what I'm doing. Anyway, I am going to end it here.